If I can call this meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We have two agendas we're going to be following this evening. First, we're going to start off with our Committee of the Whole agenda, and that will be followed, as always, by a regular meeting of Council. So with that, I'm going to call upon Councillor Bill Steele to give us a prayer, followed by Mr. Joe Longfellow that will lead us in the National Anthem. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. Lord, we ask for your guidance and direction as we come together this evening. Grant us the strength to manage the challenges ahead and the wisdom to identify these as opportunities as we strive to serve the citizens of Port Colborne. As we make decisions, please grant us the gift of an open mind, the willingness to learn, and the humility to accept the ideas of others. We ask these in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joel. Well done as always.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My pleasure as always.
With that, we'll proceed with the Committee of the Whole meeting. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you. Members of Council, I need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Doucette, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Members, are there any disclosures of interest this evening? With none, we'll move on to the items requiring a separate discussion. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item number 3.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodder.
Item 6.
Further items? Councillor Elliott.
Item 5.
Further items? Let's take a check over this. Members of staff, any items we require to have lifted this evening? I'd like to lift item 4, if one of the councillors wants to lift that item. Councillor Elliott, thank you. Mr. Aquilina, just a quick update on that program, please. Okay, members, we'll now move on to approving the items that were not lifted. If I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Danch, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to our delegations. We have 2 delegations this evening. We're going to start off with Mr. Mark Neufeld, the Chair of the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Committee, and Jamie Campbell, Engineer, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, regarding the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Committee pre-consultation notice for the Source Protection Plan draft policies. Members of Council, if you'll take note of correspondence item 11 as it refers to this delegation. Come on up. Good evening, Jamie. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of Council for this opportunity, and members of the public and staff for your time and attention. I'm also accompanied by not only Mark Neufeld, the Chair, but we also have one of our members, Drew Semple, who is one of the public interest representatives of the 9 members of the Source Protection Committee. Our presentation is part of a pre-consultation process on source protection plan policies that concern the City of Port Colborne. As a result of the Walkerton tragedy and recommendations made by Justice O'Connor, the Clean Water Act was passed in 2006 by the Government of Ontario for the purpose of protecting existing and future sources of drinking water from potential contamination and depletion. The Clean Water Act requires preparation of a source protection plan be required in each source protection area for significant drinking water threats. The source protection program was initiated by the province in 2004. Key milestones include forming the Source Protection Committee in 2007 with municipal sector and public representatives. The terms of reference in 2008, this outlined the responsibilities for components of the source protection program in the Niagara source protection area. Completion of the assessment and amended assessment reports was done in 2010, this year 2011. And these are compilations of about 20+ technical studies that direct what the program is about. We're now completing the source protection plan for August 2012, and that's legislated by the province as a deadline. And now we're completing our consultation on the draft policies. One of the main tasks of the assessment report was to delineate intake protection zones. There are 6 water treatment plants in Niagara, and intake protection zones are highlighted on this map. The total land mass that these intake protection zones cover is less than 0.05% of the total area within the Niagara Peninsula watershed. Now, the intake for the Port Colborne water treatment plant is located in the west wall of the Welland Canal, east of Elgin Street. The red area is intake protection zone 1, the closest to the intake and the most vulnerable area. The second zone, or IPZ2, is highlighted in yellow. The IPZ1 is mapped as 1 kilometer upstream, 100 meters downstream, and extends 120 meters to either side unless the drainage divide is less. The IPZ2 extends 2 hours travel time upstream and also includes the discharging storm sewer catchments. After delineating these areas, the next step is to assign a vulnerability score. This vulnerability score is based on several things, including characteristics of the intake and the characteristics of the land draining into the intake protection zone. The vulnerability score for IPZ1 is 9, and the vulnerability score for IPZ2 is 8.1. If the score is 8 or greater, there can be significant threats as defined by the Clean Water Act. According to the Clean Water Act, we must address all identified significant threats in the Source Protection Plan. The Clean Water Act essentially defines drinking water threats as activities that adversely affect or could adversely affect water use for drinking. Now, this includes potential and existing significant threats. Potential threats are threats that are possible in an intake protection zone with a given vulnerability score, regardless of the current land use. Existing threats are activities that could be threats. These were only identified for the DeQ Falls IPZ1s and are associated with agricultural land use. So there were no existing significant threats identified in Port Colborne. Now, there are 21 threat categories identified under the Clean Water Act regulations, shown highlighted in blue. There are 14 significant drinking water threat categories associated with the Port Colborne IPZs. This is a function of the vulnerability score. The rest are on the next slide. The categories are waste disposal sites, sewage systems, application of agricultural source material, which can be manure generally, storage of agricultural source material, application, storage, and handling of non-agricultural source material, which is usually biosolids, application of commercial fertilizer, application, handling, and storage of pesticide, application, handling, and storage of road salt, storage of snow, management of de-icing runoff from an airport, the use of land as livestock grazing or pasturing land, an outdoor confinement area, or a farm animal yard. Under the Clean Water Act, all significant threat activities are to be addressed to ensure they cease to be significant. Source protection plan policies must also ensure that any future activities will not create significant threats. The available source protection plan policies tools include, as listed here, education and outreach programs, incentive programs, land use planning approaches, such as official plans and zoning bylaws, provincial instruments, such as Ministry of the Environment Certificates of Approval, risk management plans. This is a new power under the Clean Water Act, Part 4, and prohibition, Part 4, another new power, and other, such as we've engaged with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation. They have specify action policies. That's to say they're not legally binding. Oh, I must add on about the, if a policy uses land use planning and requires an official plan amendment, the municipality must immediately conform to the policy requirement once the plan is approved by the province, even if the official plan is not amended for another 5 years. Policy development has included ongoing conversations with the Ministry of the Environment, who oversee this process, the Source Protection Committee, who include municipal and local representatives, as well as specialists in agriculture, industry, and planning, the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, who oversee the federal lands within the intake protection zones, City of Port Colborne Planning and Public Works staff, Niagara Region staff, and Conservation Authority staff. Okay, the Source Protection Committee have developed policies that will ensure the mandate of the Clean Water Act. Only those highlighted in blue are the responsibility of the City of Port Colborne. In some cases, the Source Protection Committee has also proposed more than one policy approach for strengthening consistency between different levels of government in preventing the threat. 5 of these threats: 1A, application of land of untreated septage; 1B, storage of tailings from mining operations; 1C, waste disposal sites; 2B, wastewater treatment plants and sewer systems discharge; and 2C, industrial effluent discharge, are not present in the Port Colborne IPZs. The Source Protection Committee has proposed provincial instrument prohibition for each of these threats. For threats 1B and 1C in IPZ 1 and discharge of 2B in IPZ 1 and 2, it is also proposed to prohibit these activities through land use planning. The St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation has also been asked to prohibit activities 1B, 1C, and 2C. The other threat activity in the slide concerns stormwater management. The Source Protection Committee proposes management, not prohibition, of this threat through land use planning to reduce stormwater pollutant loads, a stormwater management master plan, prescribed instruments, and an outreach and education program. I'll further expand on these policy approaches in a moment. On this side, land use planning prohibition is proposed for agricultural source material application, storage, and livestock lands in both zones 1 and 2, snow storage greater than 1 hectare in zone 1, open road salt storage greater than 5,000 tons in IPZ 1, and a national airport in IPZ 1. The St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation has also been asked to prohibit these activities, as well as fertilizer and pesticide application to land and pesticide storage and handling. The Source Protection Committee has also proposed provincial instrument prohibition for non-agricultural source material, that's biosolids, application, storage, and handling in both zones 1 and 2. Now, to address the threats of 8, 10, and 11, fertilizer and pesticide application to land and pesticide storage and handling, it has been proposed to use the Clean Water Act Part 4 powers of risk management plans. The Clean Water Act Part 4 powers require a risk management plan be prepared to the satisfaction of the risk management officer. This is a new position as part of the Act, and it's a person chosen by Niagara Region because they operate the water treatment plants. This approach is coupled with restricted land use for pesticide storage and handling and would be a screening layer for the City of Port Colborne chief building official to direct development applicants, for example, building a pesticide storage facility, to the risk management official. It is also proposed Niagara Region conduct an annual education outreach program with respect to road salt application, handling, and storage for the IPZ1 with its regional transportation staff and the City of Port Colborne Operations Department. Now, the stormwater discharge is a threat due to concerns with contaminants such as pathogens, metals, oils, and grease, etc. There are 6 existing stormwater facilities which outlet to the Port Colborne IPZ1 and drain areas from 1 to 41 hectares in size. To address these threats, it has been proposed to use a 4-pronged approach. First, official plan policies to reduce stormwater volume and pollutant loadings from commercial and industrial development. This is similar to your existing sewer works bylaw. A stormwater management master plan for the catchments outletting to the IPZ1, and this is already underway at the city. 3, future certificates of approval in this area shall manage stormwater in such a way to prevent it being a significant threat. And an outreach and education program shall be implemented by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority for the intake protection zones regarding water resource stewardship and stormwater management. This is a map of the stormwater catchment outfalls outletting to the Port Colborne IPZ1, and their composition is primarily residential. In future updates of the assessment report and source protection plan, is expected that additional items such as transportation corridor threats, for example, shipping and highway transport, will be addressed. We thank the City of Port Colborne Planning and Public Works staff for their comments and meeting with us provided early on, and look forward to receiving any additional comments by the second week of November. The draft Source Protection Plan is to be submitted to the Source Protection Committee in December of this year, followed by 2 sets of public consultation from February to May 2012. The Source Protection Plan is then to be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment in August 2012. So we thank you once again, Mr. Mayor, and members of Council for your time and attention. Mark Neufeld, the Chair of the Source Protection Committee, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Members of Council, are there any questions or comments? No questions or comments? Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. You're saying risk management plans are the individual that's in charge of that's brand new and that's new powers. Can you explain that and explain the one right below it, prohibition? You mentioned something again about new powers. I'd like to know what those are before we continue.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Campbell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Doucette, the Clean Water Act, if I go, the one slide, you have your handouts there. Out of the Source Protection Plan policy approaches, to the best of my knowledge, everything that you see there outside of the risk management plans of prohibition existed before and would be effectively used at this time. What was new to the Clean Water Act Part 4 powers is the ability to address threats that are actually in existence. As opposed to right now, you would, the planning department would strategically help you with your city to make sure things go in good places. However, in this case, it could be that if there was an existing land use that was causing a negative effect on a municipal water supply, with some exclusions, could be prohibited or forced to meet certain levels of care. So it's a new power to be used with care, and there has to be justification used when that's suggested. Is that, would you like me to expand more?
Councillor? That's fine. Further questions or comments? Just one question I have, Jamie. With respect to the prescribed threats that you have on the one slide as it relates to different storage of, for example, road cells.
Yes.
You show an area here of vulnerability at 9.0, pretty well in the heart of our city. That includes, obviously, the Welland Canal and the different Welland Canal activities that are on the wall, obviously on the water. My first question is, what jurisdiction do you actually have with the federal government vis-a-vis the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation? And the second question to that is with the storage of a lot of materials on the docks, like road salts, for example, is that considered a problem? Is that considered something that can be, or make the area a bit more vulnerable with respect to our intake?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be pleased to answer. First off, we've had quite a number of meetings with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation because they, to use another's words, are another country to us. This is provincial legislation and we cannot direct them what to do. However, leasees of the St. Lawrence Seaway lands there sign a contract that says that you will adhere to provincial and municipal codes, regulations, and acts. And the spirit of the discussions with them has been very good all the way along. And in fact, I was encouraged that they were glad to receive what we were providing them as a schema, if you will, for conducting some of their business. They want to be good stewards. Now, in terms of the threats that could be there, there was not something that fit this rubric, if you will. There's how these threats. There's 1,900 threats from the province, and how that's organized according to the vulnerability score. But there was nothing that was identified that were on the federal lands that we would have wanted to speak to directly. This source protection plan is directed at significant threats because that is what the powers for must conform to exist. Source protection plans can also include moderate threats for which a municipality and other agencies would only have to have regard to. And that has not been sought at this time. There would be some things as moderate threats that one might want to consider, and that certainly is an opportunity for municipalities either on their own or to encourage us to pursue that or the next round of the plan. So that's a start to that answer, but I'd be pleased to answer it in better detail with more preparation.
I appreciate that, and I think it's all too easy when we talk about the environment and the environment and economic sort of clash, that just simply be black and white and either prohibit it or just ignore it, which both, in my view, don't work. It's more of a matter of mitigating it. I think we found that out last, I believe, June, when we had a spill in the canal, and of course with that we had to act fast because of the intake being right there in a diesel bunker that was making its way over towards the intake. So my last question is, with respect to mitigation, are there opportunities when it comes to economy, such as the lands along the canal corridor, that may in fact, we may in fact have the ability, for example, to put a leachate system in that can capture some of that pollutant before it gets into the water course, and or on the water itself, is there an opportunity to mitigate future concern with respect to spills, with the intake being right there, to also capture some of that product that may find its way into the intake?
Well, first to you, Mr. Mayor, yes, definitely. That has become the focus. We've already started the next assessment report, and it's directed at exactly what you're talking about. We're well aware of what happened with the spill, and so we want to address it as well. To bore you with the legalese, we're only allowed to have a source protection plan that directs policy to threats that were identified in the assessment report, and because of the time of doing studies and such, that spill, to push that into assessment report to allow you to then speak to that directly, not there. However, I don't think that's excluding the opportunity to speak to that in the plan. There's just nuances for us to do that to your satisfaction. And I think I've read the draft report from the Seaway. I think there's a great interest in improving, despite the good response, of further improving that, and we'd be pleased to assist in any way we can. I think people have great ownership over what goes on here and want it to improve. So,
okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
With no further questions or comments? With none, if I can ask a member of council to make a motion to receive the presentation, please. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Kenny, any questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Mark, guys, thank you. Appreciate your time tonight. We'll now move to our second delegation, members of council. We have Mr. Tim Tafalo, the manager of the Port Colborne Pirates. I would imagine not just manager, but also owner, or part owner of the Port Colborne Pirates Junior B hockey team, regarding matters involving the Port Colborne Pirates, including community involvement, the new Health and Wellness Center, fundraising, and the budget. Mr. Tafalo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council and staff. I also have with me my partner in the ownership of the Port Colborne Pirates, Daryl Austin, tonight. Wanted to speak tonight about a few issues briefly, just to kind of give council a good idea and city staff a really good idea of where we are and what we do in the community and where we're headed as an organization. Past 9 years in owning the Junior B organization here in town as a non-for-profit organization, and I must stress that to everybody that we do operate as a non-for-profit organization. There's no profit that the ownership receives or anybody else. We are non-for-profit. Our reasoning for running a hockey team is to create a good environment in the community for kids to play hockey, as well as for the community to enjoy hockey, and at the same time help the community in whatever way we can. Over the past 9 years, we've fundraised and done many things for the community. Just a few things to mention. So far this year, we've raised over $4,600 for charity in the community. Our goal this year is to raise over $10,000 for charity in the community. At some point in the future years, we would like to raise that amount up to $25,000 each and every year that we raise for organizations and groups in the community. We look to an example of the Sarnia Legionnaires, who several years ago were really hurting and really changed their whole organization and how they did things. They went from roughly 150 people in their building to over 1,200 people every night in their building. And every single night, they give back to a charity in the community. In seeing the success and meeting with the people in Sarnia and going up and watching their games and seeing exactly what they do, we as an organization are trying to restructure our organization here in town so that we can do something of the same to help out groups such as minor hockey, Port Cares, Women's Shelter, and anything else anybody else in the city that we can help raise funds towards. At the same time, we have to also run our hockey team. And I do believe I provided everybody with a budget of what it takes to run a Junior B hockey team here in town. Some of these numbers are rough numbers, but they're pretty close to what we have to operate on each and every year. Some organizations run on $150,000 to $250,000 budgets a year. We run anywhere from $95,000 to $125,000 a year, depending on the year and what's going on and how far we make it in the playoffs, and if we're going to be a really good team or not. This year, we expect to be fully up towards the $125,000 mark. In looking at all of that and looking at our budget, when we look at a couple things in our budget, some of our revenues that we bring in each and every year. Currently, right now, we have rink boards at the arena, which we've had for as long as I've been here. So we do get some funds raised through rink boards, roughly $6,500 a year. Currently, right now, we also run the canteen operations, or Tuffle Enterprises runs the canteen operations, and we donate every bit of profit back to the Pirate organization in order to run the hockey team. We really wanted to show council that without these two things heading into the new Health and Wellness Center, we really would fall very, very short in operating the hockey team here in town. Over the years, we've done many, many things to try to raise money for the hockey team. Several years ago, we lost our bingos here in town, which raised roughly $13,000 a year in funds for the hockey team. When we lost that bingo, it took us roughly 3 years to catch up, to get back to an even keel with our budget. And fortunately, we went far in the playoffs last year, and we were able to catch up with our budget. These funds were always used to pay for ice time. So we had a shortfall every year for ice time, and we had to catch up every summer. Well, finally, we are caught up, and we can look forward to bigger and brighter things, I hope. But losing other things going into the new facility would drastically affect our ability to run the junior hockey team here in town. I know that things go out to tender, and I understand that. Looking at other organizations in other cities, and we have one example here in the Niagara Peninsula with the Niagara Ice Dogs. The Niagara Ice Dogs run the concessions at the Garden City Complex. And that is not for tender. They run the canteen operations. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of that you know what, this is something that we really need for the Junior B Hockey Club. We have to have those funds coming in. I don't know how we replace them. Every year we receive about $20,000 in sponsorships throughout the community. That always seems to stay the same in the 9 years that I've owned the team currently. So I really don't see how we're going to increase that amount. We try to operate as best we can. We've also ran Nickel Beach before. We've put countless numbers of hours into fundraising and volunteering and doing what we need to do to run the hockey team here in town. So I just wanted to make sure that that was brought to everybody's attention, what our needs are here in the community. We definitely want to give back and keep on giving back in the community. That's important to us. We've been helping Port Cares with dinners. Last year at Christmas time, I know we fed over 125 people. We cooked over 14 turkeys. We had a spaghetti dinner for Port Cares last year. We plan to have many more dinners for them this year. Those are just some of the things that we try to do. In comparison to other junior teams in the peninsula, one only has to look at a team such as Fort Erie and what they have that runs their organization. The Fort Erie Meteors currently run bingos still, and $27,000 a year is brought in through bingo funds to run their hockey team. Without bingos, the Fort Erie Meteors would have a tough time existing. When we look at the Thorold Blackhawks have the rink boards at their arena and raise between $20,000 to $25,000 a year through rink boards. They also have Merrittville Speedway. Okay? If we look at the Niagara Falls Canucks have had rink boards for years and years and years. And that's a major fundraiser for their hockey team and how they operate. The Welland Junior Canadians also run bingos in Welland, which is a major contribution to helping run their hockey team. The St. Catharines Falcons receive free ice from the city, and they also do the 50-50 at all of the Ice Dog games, which generates upwards of $25,000 to $30,000 a year just from the 50-50 at the Ice Dog games. So just wanted to kind of touch base on what every team has in their own communities, and if they were to lose those things, they would have a very hard time operating. I feel that these things are special to us in this community, and I would hate to have to try to find a way to make up those funds. Again, I just don't see where we would be able to do it. Our costs don't go down every year. Our costs continue to increase every year. Referees increase. We can't change those costs. Our ice time costs every year do go up. We are now one of the highest charged teams in ice time in Junior B hockey down in this loop. Okay, and that's changed drastically over the last 5 years. We used to be one of the lowest. We're no longer one of the lowest. We're now getting up to be one of the highest. Each and every team has looked at what the average is and gone back to their council and gotten reductions in their ice rates. We want to stay here in Port Colborne, and we want to provide for kids in Port Colborne as well as throughout the peninsula to play hockey and provide an exciting product for the community to come and watch. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for having us here today. Okay, appreciate your time, and come out and watch a game this year. I know we're doing pretty well, and we'd like to go all the way this year so that Vance gets to wear the Pirate jersey at many more council meetings and have pictures with other mayors wearing our jersey as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tufalo. Members of council, are there any questions or comments? With none, Tim, thank you.
Thank you.
Gary, any comments? No? I know you're working with Tim on a lot of this stuff already, so hopefully we can see some reports back to council to address some of these concerns that Tim has. So, okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank
you. Appreciate your time. Members of council, I'm not going to go into my report. It's a twofold report. As you can see to the front of my desk here this evening, there is a canvas painted by many hands during the evening of Port Colborne's first art crawl, which took place on Saturday, October 1st this past year after the successful launch of the Arts and Culture route map at the Roselawn Center of the Arts that very afternoon. More than 100 people painted on this 6x4 foot canvas, which was set up outside on the sidewalk at Something Else on the corner of West and Clarence Streets. Even the skateboard and bike trick youngsters took part in the event, as well as painting this lovely canvas. Putzi Madronich, Elizabeth Madronich, Donna Zapp, and Gail Todd wanted to keep the momentum going after the map launch at the Rose Lawn Center that afternoon, so they pulled the art crawl together in a couple of weeks, and it turned out to be a fantastic event, and they hope to do it again once again in the springtime of 2012. The downtown merchants welcomed and supported the event with great enthusiasm. 20 businesses in all, almost every business along West Street, and some along Charlotte, King, and Clarence did in fact take part. There was live music, and the work of area artists in area offices, stores, and store fronts were exhibited throughout the day. This was a real community effort with real community spirit, which is symbolized in the canvas that you see in front of my desk. People waited in line to have their turn to paint this canvas. There was a crowd around it until at least 10:30 at night along our historic West Street, along the historic Welland Canal. Now, folks, bids are being taken. Bids are being taken on the canvas. I hear the bids are at about $100 to $150 right now, so very well looked at as being, I guess, in someone's living room or dining room or rec room. These bids will be accepted until October 31st, 2011. This is being done to cover expenses and have enough to make a new canvas for the next art crawl slated for next spring, as I mentioned earlier. People can call or visit something else at 244 West Street at Clarence Street, on the canal here in downtown Port Colborne. I invite all the folks to come on down and not only take part in the possibility of bidding on this lovely canvas, but also to come and see some of the pictures of that day and evening's event. Pick up a brochure that does in fact root the arts and culture here in the city of Port Colborne, but not just in the city, also throughout the entire Niagara South Coast, including Footery Ridgeway and Wainfleet over on into the Dunnville area. A lot of great art, a lot of great activities still happening throughout the mapping and the tour. So by all means, I invite all those folks across the entire region of Niagara to take advantage of the arts and culture destinations that we have here on Niagara South Coast. As members of council know, I will be meeting with Dr. Kevin Smith, the provincially appointed supervisor of the Niagara Health System, tomorrow. At your desks is a copy of my presentation to Dr. Smith. I'm not about to go through this presentation this evening due to its length. However, the highlights of the presentation do include a brief summary of the successful changes in healthcare delivery to the citizens of the city of Port Colborne during the past 3 years in particular, a list of those whom we have been communicating and collaborating with throughout the process of developing a blueprint for Port Colborne, and I might add, all small communities throughout the province of Ontario. The need for a permanent funding model for our physicians is critical and is a part of this presentation. Port Colborne Hospital's renovations and what these renovations do in fact mean to our upcoming medical programs as identified within this presentation. The introduction of the Interprofessional Care Team pilot project, which is a collaboration with the Local Health Integration Network, McMaster's Michael G. DeGroote School of Medicine, and of course the City of Port Colborne. How we have been able to overcome many challenges to improve the delivery of community-based primary health care. How Port Colborne became a major partner with the Michael DeGroote School of Medicine, the Niagara campus here throughout the region. Why this is an invaluable tool for recruitment and medical education opportunities well into the next decade for both the city of Port Colborne as well as the region of Niagara. However, we have a long way to go. And with the approval of Dr. Smith and his blessing of this presentation and the work that's contained within the presentation, and that of the Local Health Integration Network and the Ministry of Health, we will ensure a template, a blueprint for how health care delivery should be delivered not only here in the city of Port Colborne, but throughout the entire province of Ontario with respect to all small rural centres. The challenges that we can and will address will be done through synergistic care with allied health, once again, as identified within the report. I will present to Dr. Smith our proposal of a synergistic emergency care model, a physician-directed emergency care model that incorporates emergency care not only within this site, but the synergies that exist in partnership with all sites throughout the Niagara Health System. The UCC, I still call it our emergency room, in Port Colborne, should be renamed the Port Colborne Emergency Care Site of the Niagara Health System. This would, members of council, alleviate confusion with all our citizens, let's in fact leave it up to our dedicated and efficient emergency physicians to decide whether the acuity of care is required, where it's required, and when it's required. The emergency department in Port Colborne would continue to operate in an efficient manner, but with the addition of allied healthcare professionals, both in triage and clinical treatment. We also believe that the Ontario Telemedicine Network has an excellent opportunity to provide supportive services within our emergency department here at the Port Colborne site. We believe we are and can be a template, a blueprint, as mentioned earlier, for what a rural small community emergency center should be modeled after. We have, with diligence and collaboration, worked with all levels of healthcare management and been able to successfully develop our own clinical services plan for the City of Port Colborne within our local site. This proposal introduces, once again, members of council, allied health professionals, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, into the new emergency center as triage specialists. This would be a physician-directed, collaborative care model of emergency care. Once again, a funding model would be in place that recognizes the value of the emergency physicians, but also creates a fair and equitable access to health care that is affordable well into the future. Without that funding model, our site and the City of Port Colborne is vulnerable to immediate changes because of no funding model for our family physicians, our emergency physicians within this site, whether it continue to be a UCC or within an emergency care model. A freestanding emergency department in Port Colborne will alleviate emergency department overcrowding at all sites throughout the Niagara healthcare system, increase patient access to emergency services, provide a needed public service, and create a very much improved source of patient flow. We believe that the Port Colborne site of the Niagara Health System will function in a far more efficient manner with the reestablishment of a fully functioning emergency room that is capable of handling patients within the acuity of CTAS 3, 4s, and 5s, while at the same time, with intubation and resuscitation capabilities, deal with CTAS 1s and 2s. This will decrease the burden on our closest regional facility with inpatient acute care beds. Bed management is critical for success, and we propose the establishment of, as well, a clinical decision unit, enhanced human resource model of emergency care, emergency trained physicians as site lead, as I mentioned earlier, and new and enhanced equipment as is identified, as you can see, within the proposal that I'm presenting to Dr. Smith. And finally, that Dr. Smith supports our community's introduction of the interprofessional care, the IPC pilot project that was presented to members of council a few weeks ago by Dr. Stobie, Joanne Ferriccioli, and Dr. Remington. This with a mandate of promoting, integrating, aligning, and delivering a new and improved model of primary care which is driven by community and patient needs, determinants of health, perceived gaps in care, with an overall goal linking existing family physicians, allied health professionals, and inpatient and outpatient care. Members of council, I'd be remiss if I didn't as well take this opportunity to extend my sincere appreciation to you, members of council, but equally, and I apologize for this, but equally, if not more importantly, to city staff. In particular, Joanne Ferriccioli, our healthcare coordinator, she is a professional, as well as our local and regional physicians, healthcare workers, and many others throughout both the City of Port Colborne, the region, and quite frankly, even the province, for their involvement in contributing to this document and to this presentation. It truly was a team effort. Although I have the privilege as the mayor of the city to communicate this document to Dr. Smith, believe me, it was a team effort. It was close to 3 years of collaboration from our staff, as well as our docs here and our physicians here in the city, throughout the region, and of course those medical professionals and healthcare workers throughout the region and the province of Ontario, including the Ministry of Health themselves. So I do have to express my sincere appreciation for those folks that have really put their professionalism into this document. And I look forward to presenting this document to Dr. Smith tomorrow on the behalf of the City of Port Colborne. So with that, members of council, I do ask if there's any questions or comments. With none, wish me luck. And as you can see, I did include the actual document itself. Please take a read over it over the night. If you have any questions, just give me a call. I'm not meeting tomorrow until 1:30. But anything that you want to add to it, or any comments that you might have, by all means, send me a quick email or a phone call, and I'll be sure to make sure it's actually in the document, as well as the discussion with Dr. Smith. Okay. With no questions, I'll now move on to the Regional Councilor's report, and I do apologize because it seems like I'm capitalizing or monopolizing the meeting here, but I apologize because Mr. Barrick, Councillor Barrick, is not able to attend this evening's meeting. Councillor Barrick is at the region dealing with water, wastewater, and waste management issues, as there's a meeting, public meeting tonight at regional headquarters. So he asked me to pass on a few little tidbits, Regional Council report updates for your information, as well as information to members of the public. First off, the Niagara region does welcome the Cultural Capital of Canada designation that was most recently announced by Minister Nicholson. And as we had mentioned on many occasions, and I mentioned just earlier, with the very bountiful arts and culture individuals, businesses, and of course organizations that we have here in the city of Port Colborne, it goes without saying that we have the opportunity to welcome that designation. I have to say as well, I had an opportunity to attend the Festival of Arts 25th anniversary kickoff music extravaganza over at Central United Church on Saturday. And I'll tell you guys, it was a free event, but I would have paid $50 to go see that event because it was absolutely spectacular. Without question, spectacular. The talent that we have here in the city of Port Colborne is just unbelievable. We had people there singing, we had people on piano, instruments, and I'll tell you, it was absolutely fantastic. So I really encourage you folks out in the public, as well as members of council, anytime you have an opportunity to go and see these guys and gals really performing through the Festival of Arts, take advantage of it. It's just absolutely spectacular. So once again, it's a welcome to Minister Nicholson and the federal government to name in Niagara as a cultural capital of Canada. As well, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we do have our flu shots coming up here in Port Colborne. Those that want to get a flu shot can, next door here at Guild Hall, Wednesday, November 9th, 2011, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Once again at Guild Hall. Please take advantage of it. It really means a lot to get your flu shot to then decrease not only the you getting a flu, but also when you do get the flu, it decreases the chance of others around you getting the flu. So take advantage of it. As well, we do have one the day before on Tuesday, November 8th, in Wainfleet, over at the Wainfleet Firefighters Memorial Community Hall. So both November 8th, November 9th, Wainfleet, Port Colborne, both 1 to 8, Wainfleet Firefighters Memorial Hall or Guild Hall. Please take advantage of it. As well, Niagara's mobile dental clinic, it will be launched on October 27th, 2011 at 5:30 p.m. This launch of the Niagara Mobile Dental Clinic includes floss, cutting, dental clinic tour, and photo opportunities. For those interested, please take advantage of it. As Niagara region does not have fluoride in our water supply, of course, other methods of taking care of our teeth are very important, and please take advantage of Niagara's mobile dental health clinic for those very reasons. Lastly, the 2012 budget public engagement session. The next session will be held in the town of Foote at your town hall on November 2nd from 7 to 9. Please, once again, take advantage of that. It's very in-depth as it relates to the regional budget, and quite frankly, it's not as dry as you might otherwise think it would be. It's pretty thought-provoking, as well as a lot of information involved in the process. Take full advantage of it. It is your dollar, and have a say in where your dollar goes. So with that, once again, Councillor Barrick does send his apologies. That's his report. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Comments? With none, we'll now move on to Councillor's items and new business, and I can sit back and listen to you for a change. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask your opinion in a few minutes on this issue because I don't know what we can do, but I would like to be able to show our indignation at the fact that while I was watching CBC last week, they made this announcement of this older woman having broken her leg. And I don't know as a council if we can do something about that. We can send something to NHS, or is it worth sending something to Mr. Smith? He's very much aware of it because I read it in the paper. He's very much aware of the situation. What I'd like him to know, though, is the fact that those kinds of situations are happening in other places. Example, our own long-term health people need to call 911 and an ambulance to be able to be serviced, and the hospital is right next door. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. And somehow we've got to get that through to everyone, that when someone is injured near a hospital, the hospital that is there needs to service it, needs to service the injury, needs to service the patient. It's the patient that is critical. And I'm not sure what to do about that, but I thought I'd bring it up and see what we can or cannot do. That's a hard one.
Well, it's not hard. It's just trying to hold my emotions, because it is very frustrating, to say the very least. It's happened on a few occasions now, and I think Councillor Kenny can attest to the many times it's happened in Port Colborne General Hospital. I know from talking to one individual, it just happened recently at our hospital site, whereby a lady, an older lady, an elderly lady, was in the car, and simply the daughter was with her. Actually, you know what? She wasn't elderly. She was middle-aged, which goes to the seriousness of her injuries, because she couldn't help herself in. And the daughter had a hard time helping her in as well, only to go into the hospital and ask for help, and only to be told no, go home and call 911. The individual then went back to the car, and this is right in the hospital parking lot, went back to the car, went home and called 911. And of course, the first question the ambulance driver asked her was, why didn't you go to the Port Colborne site? Whereby she explained what she was told. When the ambulance then drove her to Welland, the nurse asked her at Emerge, or at the counter, why didn't you go to the Port Colborne site? When she then told the story. And to boot, she now received a bill for the ambulance drive to Welland. So it's not happening just in Niagara Falls. It's not happening just in St. Catharines and Welland. It's happening across the entire system. However, and
is there something
there is. There's no question that we're dealing with that. All of us are dealing with that through our committee at the region. We are trying to come to resolve. There's no sense trying to push blame on someone, because the finger pointing just goes around in a circle. And by all means, I don't want to push blame onto the employees, because of course they have a directive that's been given to them by management, and they're abiding by that directive. We just had a memo that I had passed to members of council months back, where it even said when members of the staff here in Port Colborne find a situation that's serious, that they are to call 911. So again, you know, it's something that I'm hoping there's a resolve that we can attach to it in our discussions with Dr. Smith. That's why he was brought here as a supervisor, was to deal with those situations, deal with those problems. And I may be being too optimistic, but you know, it's part of the process of us not only presenting, as I am tomorrow, to Dr. Smith, but also being a part of the process from, assuming the next year, to in fact take care of some of these problems. So rest assured, Councillor, it'll be brought up, it will be discussed, and we expect that a resolve will happen sooner rather than later. Okay? See, I was calm there. Further new business, or Councillor Danch?
Don't even know who I'm going to ask this one for, but I'm sure a lot of people in the community have noticed that brand new fence around the property on the corner of Charlotte and King, and I really got to wonder. I've seen a lot of fences in my life. That's got to be the worst looking fence I've ever seen. How did it even happen? I mean, did he receive a permit for this? Because that's brutal. I just kind of wonder, and so do a few other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Danch. A permit for a fence is not a requirement. There is a fence bylaw that needs to be adhered to, and that fence does conform to the city's fence bylaw.
Councilor?
Having a fence that looks like it's from Thorold Correctional, I see in the downtown core. Obviously, the owner is not happy because he's gone ahead and blocked some, let's say, not the best parking because the parking lot was a little deteriorated and probably didn't want to do the upkeep, but you would think that with the CIP planning for the downtown core and the upgrades that the community has done on Main Street, of course, and looking at going downtown, maybe we could have, kind of bent a little bit to try and appease this guy for maybe another year as, planning is ongoing. But I just find it to be just one ugly looking fence.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Aquilino?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor Danch. We did talk to the property owner. The property is for sale. We tried to steer him away from putting a fence up, as you made mention of the improvements we're trying to make. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do as a municipality. We have the bylaw, and he was adhering to it. I mentioned to council again that the property is up for sale. So whether that was his thought that the property would be quicker to sell, I don't know, but as I mentioned to council, we were trying to kind of steer him away from doing that because, as you mentioned, Councilor Danch, it's not very sightly, that's for sure.
Just a question, if I may, Dan. In your discussions with the property owner, who I'm assuming is from out of town, what was the motivation for putting the fence up in the first place?
Mr. Mayor, the motivation was for the protection of his property. The fact that there has been encroachments from people entering onto his property, parking onto his property. There's been some damage to the back of this property from people trespassing. So that was a method for him to try to solve those issues, unfortunately.
Any further comments?
Thanks, Dan.
I was waiting for it. I have Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd certainly support Councillor Danch if he wants to bring in an ugly fence bylaw, but you could bring that up at the next meeting if you want. I'd just like to announce that Councillor Butters and myself are going to have a Ward 4 meeting Sunday, November 13th at 7 p.m. at the Sherkson Community Center. It's located on the corner of Empire and Sherkson Road, and we welcome all. Don't have to be from Ward 4, but if you want to come out, we'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bodnar. That was November 13th at 7 p.m. Yep. At Sherkson. Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll get just three quick items, well, two quick ones, and hopefully the third one will go quickly. A few months ago, we passed funding for the museum, and it was report number 2011-13, Enabling Accessibility Fund Grant and request for proposal from Museum Accessibility. And what it included was to build a ramp and some sidewalks, the entryway, the new main office for the museum. And what we did was we passed it. We were going to take money out of the reserve fund for the L.R. Wilson building to help fund this project. And at a subsequent museum meeting, I was reading the report again, and it just struck me that there was the word was used twice, and it's the word recommended, and it says that as the Heritage Research Center is fairly new and will not require the funds in the short term, and these funds were raised specifically for the center, it is recommended that the reserve fund be replenished. I guess I stand here tonight and ask for council support in the upcoming budget that we put this money back in that reserve fund as quick as possible. The L.R. Wilson building contains a significant amount of history in it, and I would hate to see that as we move forward, that with the reserve fund replenished right now, that we don't have the money should anything happen to that building going forward. So I hope I can count on your support at budget time that we do put money aside every year for the next 4 years to replenish the reserve fund. Secondly, I guess this is going back over the last month or two. There's been two fires in Port Colborne, significant fires, one on Welland Avenue, or Welland Street, and one up on the 140, the barn fire that had the car in it that the police were investigating. Both of them were reported that we had out-of-town fire departments come and help us out. And the fire chief isn't here tonight, but I would ask for a report as to why we called on out-of-town firefighters to come and assist us, and if there's any financial cost to have. I know that Fort Erie came to one and Welland came to the other, I believe. and why that occurred with a full-time staff and with a volunteer force of several, why we are required to call out-of-town fire departments to come and help us out. The third thing, and I hope this is just as quick, on Friday I received a phone call that was from a constituent in a panic because she was out front of St. Patrick's School picking up her children, and the bylaw enforcement officer decided to show up at 3:10 and was going to ticket everybody for parking in an area that is signed no standing at any time from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Now, St. Patrick's School does not have any parking lots for people to drive into and park to pick up their kids. Generally, people are parking on the west side of Rosemount. They angle park when they come to pick their children up. There is parking on the east side of Rosemount. That usually is full, so everybody else parks along the side of Rosemount, angle parking towards the field at the back of the school. Now, I live right around the corner. Every time I see this, these people are there for 10 or 15 minutes. They're in, they wait for the kids, they go get the kids, they come out, and within 10 or 15 minutes, everybody's gone. It's not an all-day thing. I don't know if this was complaint-driven by somebody to bylaw about it, but there was a couple of parents that were fairly upset that the bylaw officer showed up at that precise time and was threatening people that if you don't move your car, you're going to get a ticket. If we force the people to park on Rosemount or on Clarence Street, there is no crossing guard. So therefore, you've got all the kids crossing the street to get into their cars, which to me is a recipe for disaster. I got a text message today from the parent that I talked to. They did say that they communicated with the principal, and the principal has said that they would do anything they can in their power to work with the city to alleviate the situation. My question, I guess, is if we allow parking on that street after 6 o'clock, what makes it so bad to allow 10 or 15 minute parking at 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon? People don't park there all day long because it's obviously signed. If we left the signs with the exception of the, I guess if you want to call it the kiss and cry area to drop your kids off, I think that we should do something to remedy the situation. Anything we can do with the school to help out, I think we should do. So if we can look into that.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Mr. Heil, I'm going to be asking you for a response for question number 1 with respect to the museum and the reserves, and question number 2 with respect to mutual aid with the fire department, and as well attached to that is the cost or lack thereof of that mutual aid.
Question number 1, we advanced the capital. We had lots of discussion financially about how we could fund so we didn't lose the $75,000 grant. We're trying to find funding wherever it was, and we're basically borrowing from the L.R. Wilson reserve. It will be repaid from future capital expenditures that don't have to be done in respect of making the property and the facility disability enabled. So the capital that has to be spent is going to pay back L.R. Wilson beginning in 2012. There is in the plan, it is in the budget. It will come to this council, and it was a commitment that we had made at that point in time in trying to find enough funding to support our share of that $75,000 grant so that work could proceed. That's number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. That's fine. Okay. Go ahead.
Number 2, mutual aid is not a cost. Generally in the rural areas where you need water, you'll call in another fire company to bring water in, or material that you don't have or that is taxed already. And in both of these cases, I believe we had extra water forces being brought in to help a huge fire, which is not abnormal. There is an agreement. It's called a mutual agreement under the legislation, and the insurance for our fire department covers our fire department when it's outside of Port Colborne, as well as other companies have coverage when they come into Port Colborne. There is no fee. There is no transaction of financial. It is a service to support each other in the department for the sole purpose of ensuring that life and property are protected to the fullest extent possible.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Councillor, that's fine? Okay, I'm going to go to number 3 now. Mr. Aquilino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Elliott. It was about 2 years ago where there was a report that came forward to council. It was at the request of St. Patrick's School. It's a very dangerous situation there. We know that. The council of the day passed the no standing just because of the sheer volume of parents that come in and come out. It's a dangerous situation. As you mentioned, there is parking along Clarence and Rosemount. The angle parking there, it's something we don't do anywhere else. It's dangerous. And so that's why we have the no standing zone there. Our bylaw enforcement staff, parking enforcement staff, they are out there regularly, not only in that area, but all the other different school zones, ensuring that those parking bylaws that this council has are actually enforced. It's a dangerous situation. If council will like the report to come back to have another look at that, it will be a quick report because it will be one that we brought forward to council in the past. So if council would like that to happen, we can sure look into it again and bring a report forward for council's consideration.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Dan. If you could bring that back again, we could have a look at it. I guess my thought is that it's a tough situation to speak about, but in the past couple of years, there has been reports to the police about people around the schools approaching the kids. In this day and age, I mean, back when we were kids, everybody walked to school. I think if you've ever been past a school at 9 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, you know that it seems like everybody gets a ride. There's no kids that walk to school anymore. Somehow, we've got to allow a concession for these people to come in and drop the kids off, I would think, close to the school. With no crossing guard at the corners, if the parents are letting the kids out on the street and saying, you know, there you go, get yourself to school. Now we got kids crossing the street in the middle of the road, not at the corners where they're going to get safely ushered across. I think maybe we should take a look at the parking regulations, and maybe we can massage it for just those short periods of time when the parents are dropping their kids off.
Any comments? No? Councillor Steele on that topic?
Thank you, Your Worship. Approximately 5, 6, or 7 years ago, I went through the same issue, and that was brought to me not only by the neighbors of the school, but also parents of children that attended the school. I go there not every day, but pretty much every day I'm there either in the morning or at night, depending on how I running my kids to, not that school, but a different one. But it is chaos. I mean, you've got people that park the wrong way, angle park, parallel park. It all came to a head when they were parking in neighbors' driveways. There was a number of fender benders from people coming in, backing out, and staff came forward. My understanding is that when the addition was put on that school, there was a drop-off zone used on Hampton Avenue. They're supposed to use Clarence Street on the north side of the property. The bus area was left for the front of the property. They were trying to alleviate the chaotic condition. And at that time, as I said, you not only had neighbors, but you had parents that were very concerned about when they were dropping their kids off, they were worried somebody's going to get hit, as well as those that do walk to school. There are a number of kids that do walk to school. So I think we better look at our past history on this, past reports and information that came forward. I know staff worked with a former principal, and it seemed to get better over time. Now I've noticed in the last year or so it's gotten worse again. And it is. I mean, you may say it's only 10, 15 minutes. It takes a lot less time for somebody to get run over or smash into another car because of the way they can wheel it in and out. There's no rhyme or reason to how they do it. But if you look, Clarence Street is wide open. It pulls up to the curb. You can let your child off, and they're off on the sidewalk side. They can go into the school. If you come into the back, I mean, I know we had to tell the school that their teachers are supposed to park in the school-provided parking for their staff, which some don't. They take up street parking, which they're not supposed to be. And the rear of the school, or if you want to call the Hampton the rear of the school, which has the large gate at it, and the Clarence Street side where the drop-off because of the way the doors exited out of the cars. Other than, I suppose, your junior kindergarten kids, I don't think most of those kids need to be walked into a school in my mind. But there's a number of them, boss. But I mean, there's a lot of cars there. But be careful what you ask for, Councillor, because it can get chaotic, and there were some major problems before. So I think we should look at what we had in the past, so that, you know, catch yourself up on what Dan and his staff did at that time, and previous to Dan, and what Sherry's done in the past. I think that'd be wise for that area, because it's not a pretty picture.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kenny on this topic? That's fine. Okay, so we'll wait for that report to come back. We can discuss it then, ask questions and debate it then. Okay, nothing else on this? Great, thank you. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This coming weekend is coming into Halloween. Week from today will be Halloween. So on Friday, September 28th, and on Saturday, the 29th, there's going to be a spooktacular event at St. Pat's Church. Big fundraiser yard sale that is being put on by the Colborne Feline Initiative. All the monies raised goes to help spay and neuter the cats in our community, the homeless ones, as well as a new program that we've started, an assistance program to low-income folks. So we're going to do something a little different and start at Friday night. The world-famous bake table will be there on Saturday. We're accepting donations, can be dropped off at the hall anytime after 10 on Friday. We're going to open Friday night at 6:30 to 10, so if you're in a yard sale mode, come on over. Saturday morning from about 8 till 4 o'clock. Hope to see you there. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Any further new business, Councillors' items? Councillor Danch?
Just one more. I know there's going to be some topic there later on, but with the Queen walking around the community there the last few nights, and it seems to be a lot of street lights out, and it doesn't seem to be like for short periods of time, but long periods of time. Not to pick on where I live, 55 Neff, that thing's been out for 6 months. I walked across the middle bridge from the east side, and the two lights there just before the corner there, it is pitch black. Another person in my store, Carter Street, 33 Carter, again, lights out. I don't know, I mean, I know it's darker now, and obviously it's that time of the year, but I just think we need to either give these people a phone number on our website so they can get a hold of CNP or get a hold of them directly, because it's freaking pitch black out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ron, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Councillor Danch, there is a phone number on our website. There's a reference to it. There's a number in there where they can call CNP and report a street light that's out. If they don't feel comfortable with doing that, they're welcome to call City Hall, call our department, and we'd be happy to forward that particular request on to CNP.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. And if you can, Ron, maybe forward that number to members of council. And that way all members of council can have it, so that if you do get a call like that, Councillor Danch, you can just either pass the number on or you can call them yourself. Okay, thank you. Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson about that. What is the average time it takes for these to be fixed? Because I know over the summer I had an issue, and it took 6 to 8 weeks for CNP to show up to fix the lights. Now, if it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks, you're talking Christmas time by the time those are fixed. Okay? If it's going to take that long, is there any way of speeding up the process?
In talking to CNP about this issue personally on a few of the complaints that I received from some of the residents, it all depends on the timing. They don't send a truck out every day to fix a light. They'll send a truck out to fix a dozen lights or 20 lights in one day. So instead of sending one truck out to fix that one light, and then the next day or the next week another light, they'll schedule a truck for a whole day to fix all lights in the city. So sometimes you might get them too early, where it's 6 to 8 weeks later they get that truck out to fix all the lights, or you might get them a week before that truck goes out and you get lucky and it gets fixed within that week. So, but the bottom line is that, and what we've been told, and Councillor Kenny can attest to this because she sits on the board with a few of us, and Councillor Steele, they'll send that truck out usually once a month. That truck will go out, fix all the lights, one shot. It's just a matter of getting that truck, in terms of the timing, sooner rather than later. So you must have been early. Exactly. Members of staff, are there any updates or responses that you wanted to bring to council's attention? With none, go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city's procedural bylaw provides that council is going to hold only one meeting in the month of December. This year, the options for the meeting are December 5th, the 12th, and the 19th. The 26th, we're going to be closed for the Christmas break. December 12th is considered by staff to be the most suitable date, as it provides a balance of time between the last meeting in November and the first meeting in January, and it also allows the clerk's division to complete necessary follow-up after our meeting in December. So I'm just requesting that council, by leave, introduce a motion to pass December 12th as the recommended date.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, if we're going to have a motion for leave, Councillor Danch, Councillor Steele, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. A motion to accept our December meeting as December 12th, 2011. Councillor Steele, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Any questions or comments to that? Concerns? Everybody's good with that? Staff's good with that, obviously. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Members, I'm now going to need a motion to accept the minutes of the 24th meeting regular of Committee of the Whole, October 11, 2011. Mover, seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Now, members, we'll move on to the items requiring a separate discussion this evening. We're going to start off with item 3. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that the Department of Planning and Development, report number 2011-79, subject land titles, Walnut Street, Orchard Drive, and Oak Ridge Crescent, be approved, recommending 1, that the council receives this report for information purposes. 2, that staff be directed to acquire lands identified as Part 23 on the site condition plan at fair market value from owners of 53 and 57 Oak Ridge Crescent, where the portion of the paved road is located, and that the city covers all survey costs. 3, that the staff be directed to acquire land identified as Part 16 on the site condition plan in exchange for land identified as Part 15 on the site condition plan for the property at 111 Oak Ridge Crescent, and that the city cover all survey costs, and that the process for disposal of surplus property be followed by law 32189095. 4, that staff be directed to aid only those property owners requesting assistance that are landlocked along Walnut Street, and that all survey costs be split 50%, and that the process for disposal of surplus property followed by law 32189095. 5, that the staff be directed to obtain a transfer from the Crown for land identified as Part 5 and 6 on the site condition plan to establish the paved portion of Walnut Street to be on city property. 6, that staff be directed to quit claim lands identified as Part 4 and 13 on the site condition plan to establish the paved intersection of Walnut Street and Oak Ridge Crescent to be on city property. 7, that staff be directed to register a transfer and dedicate certain lands, Parts 1, 2, and 3 on the site condition plan as a public highway for Walnut Street and Orchard Drive and Oak Ridge Crescent. And 8, that the above items commence subject to council's consideration and approval of a $10,000 expenditure in the 2012 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Elliott. Before I go to council, I'm going to ask Mr. Aquilina to give us, I guess, some sort of explanation on this. I know it's been going on for a good amount of time. 10 plus years. It goes back to the 1800s to some extent. But if you can give council basically a breakdown of what's happening here, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess to summarize things, it's a dog's breakfast, for lack of a better term. And as you mentioned, this dates back to 1875, when one of the first registered plans in this area were laid down. That plan identified a certain width of streets, and for example, Walnut Street was at 60 feet in width. Subsequently, the town of Port Colborne stopped up and closed a portion of that road being 30 feet. Fast forward about 3 or 4 decades, a new plan gets laid down. The surveyor and the lawyers involved had no idea that the town of Port Colborne had stopped up and closed a portion of that road. They overlaid a new plan for that entire area. So what that did ultimately was affect the frontages of property, assuming that it was fronting on a maintained road, but it wasn't there. So over the years, there have been a lot of transactions that have occurred on title, and the city, or the town of Port Colborne at the time, and probably the city of Port Colborne, assumed that certain properties were under their ownership, undertook certain improvements to the roads, paved the roads, put in services. Port Colborne Hydro assumed the same thing, put in poles, guy wires, not on lands owned by the municipality. So a lot of the services that are there right now, a lot of the poles are on private property. There are portions of the paved road on private property. There are some property owners that on paper are landlocked on Walnut Street. And on some areas of the city, on Oak Ridge Crescent, there is a very insufficient road allowance width. So what I had done, given the report that came forward to council in April, kind of summarized all that the best that I could. And the direction was that I meet with each individual property owner that is affected to go over each individual issue, I did that during the months of July, August. I was unable to meet with one property owner, but everyone else I did have contact with. Up until the other day, I received an email from one person I wasn't able to have contact with. So what the risk report recommends, based on the conversations that I've had with all the property owners that are affected, it recommends different things that council needs to consider and provide direction on. You'll see in the options, there are a lot of options council could take to increase the road allowance width, but give and take the fact that there are certain objections from property owners, council needs to be cognizant of what that may require and the challenges of that. And so what the report recommends is threefold: to increase the road allowance widths of Walnut Street and Oak Ridge Crescent where there is cooperation from the property owners, to assist those property owners that are requesting to be assisted to resolve their landlocked issues, and to do a land swap to increase the road allowance width of Orchard Drive and Oak Ridge Crescent in that area there. So going back from 1999, this was first work done by staff. Unfortunately, kind of fell off the shelf. So my responsibility was to get this back to council and provide a direction and to have some recommendations that council needs to consider and to try to work with the property owners to resolve these matters. And the recommendation is brought forward to you this evening and is subject to budget considerations in the 2012 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. So, members of council, who wants to enter into this fray? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we go on, can we just ask for leave now in case some of the residents want to ask questions after? We'll get that out of the way if we could do that right now. So I'll move for leave.
Is there going to be a desire by any of the residents to speak? Yeah, okay. If I can have leave, please. Moved by Councillor Steele, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Any questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That be carried. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been dealing with this back late 90s, early 2000s. Might have been Mrs. Premi that started this. It went to Mrs. Beckett, and now it's gone through clerk today, Mr. Aquilina's office. It originally reared its ugly head when there was a land sale in the area, and how it didn't come up before this, I don't know. But the lawyer of the time was John Tuck, who also looked after city business in the day. There was a piece of land that was being sold. However, there was a chunk of land in front that was from an old estate that actually developed this area. So in essence, you had the person's lot, this no man's land, and then the city property. So in essence, they were landlocked. There was no way for them to really access the road legally. So some of those, if you look at your maps, really Walnut Street to the west has all been lined up now, as opposed to these little juts in and out as you went down Walnut Street. If you look to the east side of Walnut Street, you've got areas where there's the road, it's landlocked, and then there's property. Some of these are still owned by this estate from way back. My understanding that it's been given, I assume, to us now based on what Dan's found out. That I don't know if we still have to contact the estate or how that works. I mean, as he said, it is a dog's breakfast. I dealt with Walnut Street. Now it does come into play that in reality there's really 3 streets or roads that are involved in this. And if you look at your map, it comes in and goes out, comes in and goes out. My first question to Dan is, Dan, in essence of making the road 66 feet wide, this isn't for us to go in and pave a swath 66 feet wide. This is to look at the paved portion, the shoulder portion, and the portions that we put our services on, as well as hydro poles and guy wires, correct?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Steele, it is correct. There is no direction from council to put any curbing, to increase the road allowance width, to repave it, to put boulevards in, to remove trees. It is simply and strictly a paper exercise to try to increase the road allowance widths.
Yeah. Councilor? Because I know the concern, I mean, mostly from Oak Ridge Crescent and Orchard Drive, is that we're going to come in and take down mature trees and widen a road where it's a very narrow road now. However, that is the area, that's the look of the area, that's the feel of the area, that's what the residents want to continue. We can all understand that. So through your worship to Dan, is there a way, how can we do this so that there isn't a council in the future that decides to put a 66-foot road in or some type of wider section? How can we create something here, especially on Oak Ridge Crescent where it is now narrow, if you had a number of residents in the future come forward, well, we want a wider road at this time. You never know what can happen. We know what we want today, what we don't want to do today, but can this area be protected for the future as far as whatever's paved now stays paved, and obviously any land that we acquire, which some we do, some we don't, that those are maintained as front lawns in essence.
Mr. Aquilino?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councilor Steele, the direction of this council is for today. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, a new council may come in and may have a totally different idea for the area.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee. We know what's on title today. We can deal with that today.
Okay.
But what can happen in the future, it's something that council would have to consider at that time.
So for this 4 years, we're set then. So, okay, I'll take that. I just wondered if there was something on there. Okay. Next one is a question from a resident on Walnut Street with regards to the 50% share with the survey of the area. Can you just explain on, because what has happened in the past is it seems like we've had our surveyors in there, whether they be our staff or our hired surveyors. There's been a number of times when that's been brought up at meetings. Can you just explain what the process has been and what type of surveys we've had and what we need to go to next?
Mr. Aquilino?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor Steele, what the city did, they retained a firm, a surveying firm, to produce a sketch. And that is what's referred to as the site condition sketch. Get the proper terminology. That is Appendix A, the site condition plan. My apologies. Another thing I just want to bring council for your awareness is that I've reproduced the air photo, and I brought that on your desk. There was one error that I caught, and that's for the property that is west of 27 Walnut Street, the Roland property. We, in fact, own the land to the west of his property. So that is just for your information. Back to your question, Councilor Steele, we did prepare the survey sketch that actually identified the different parts that are subject to the report this evening and their recommendations for what the city should do to try to achieve the road allowance width. With any sort of legal transaction, what needs to be done is having a reference plan created. This plan, the sketch, would form the basis of that reference plan, but the process would be for the Ontario Land Surveyor to go out there, survey it, state the corners for each parts on that reference plan, and that plan is then deposited by the land registry. That then forms the basis for our legal team to actually convey title to property based on those parts on the reference plan. So the background work has been done. I provided the estimate to do the reference plan. It's about $7,000 to do everything. Depending on what council's direction is, it could be reduced. But that's something that would need to be done by Ontario Land Surveyor.
Councilor?
Okay. Just to a little bit of a background for some of the new councilors is that Walnut Street was originally supposed to be a boulevard where it was actually 2 lanes of traffic with a grassed and treed area down the middle. It was never built. Why, I don't know, but that goes back to the late 40s, early 50s. So that's why you've kind of have that area where some people own the front of their property, some people don't own it. But there's still parts of the original plan of subdivision that are owned by now the estate of the original designer of that. So that's kind of the history in Walnut. The only question I do have through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Aquilino is number 23 Walnut's Mike Green's home. And he's been involved with this basically for 10 plus years when it went back to when Mr. Tuck was involved and the former staff were involved. He's asked me to ask council that the 50% he would have to pay be waived due to the fact that when he was involved with this at that time through his discussions with staff, he wouldn't have been responsible back then, but the legislation has changed. I'm not sure of anybody else that was dealing with staff at that time. I know Mike has been because he's been here for a number of other issues that have come up along the street also that pertain to specifically his property. But Dan, is that correct that when he started in this that the act stated he wouldn't have to pay for that 50% at that time or a portion of it or all of it? Has that changed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Steele, I believe what he's referring to is the legal fees. At the time, the Law Society will allow certain lawyers to deal with both parties. We, in fact, used to have our lawyer act on behalf of ourselves and the private property owner, but the Law Society changed that. And so now each individual property owner has to have their own lawyer, and they're in consultation with our lawyer. back to the survey costs, right now the council's bylaw on disposal of surplus property kind of allows council some flexibility in as to how you want to proceed with having people pay for the costs. There's some flexibility. There's nothing that says hard fast that they have to pay for it. Policy talks about that, but that's something that council can grant. I know in the past, depending on what the situation is, we've gone 50-50. In other cases, we've gone 100%. It's really the basis of who's benefiting this or who's benefiting from this. In this case, I thought, well, the policy is not clear. It allows some flexibility. I'd recommend a 50-50, but if the council's direction is to recover or pay for all those costs, that's something that can be done. It's just subject to budget consideration, and your monies required in 2012 will be slightly higher.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Councillor?
thank you. So through your worship, I just wanted to clear up that cost on the survey section. So that would have always been a cost, whether we did it all, was a shared cost, so that's the same. So in essence, these people now, because the Law Society's rules have changed, would maintain their own lawyer, and then we would have our own lawyer, and they would deal with it that way. So that's something beyond our control altogether, correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay. Your worship, that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would support the 100% fee for us. If he had the opportunity years ago to get this settled, going to burden him with that, to get it straightened out. I think if there's any way that we can look at that and settle that. Second of all, with the land that you show in the Appendix B as the obtain, if we take all that land back, does that put all the utilities on the road allowance?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, yes. Keep in mind, Councillor, that there are no municipal facilities on the O's except the portions of the road. A lot of these would actually resolve CMP's issue with the fact that the poles are on private property. But for the city, the only issues that would need to be resolved is the fact that the paved portion of the road is on these private properties. There's no services like sewer or water.
There's no storms. So would all CMP's utility, their poles, would they become? Yeah. So now are they located on the road allowance now? If we take this all back, or are they still going to be set on private property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, depending on the direction of council and where those O's are, if council doesn't move forward with those O's, then those poles will remain on private property.
Okay. Okay. Second of all, I guess when you read some of the concerns that the people have, obviously they've gardened, they've planted trees. I don't think there's a will of council. I don't want to speak for anybody, but I can't see us wanting to go in there and make this a 66-foot road. What I would like to see is if we could grandfather in anybody that has any gardening or any trees that they've planted, that their encroachment be allowed, because it would now be on city property. I mean, this is going on for so long that those people have just kind of built up on city land. I don't know if there's liability with that or if we can allow that, but I would hate to say, you know what, I want to take back a portion of your front yard, and now that the garden that you've had for 20 or 30 years, or you've put rocks out, or you've got a tree growing, now you have to take that down. If there's a way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to add to that a bit, Dan, would it be possible for the city just to simply put in place an easement? So I'll throw that in the mix of Councillor Elliott's question as well.
Through Mr. Mayor, to both yourself and Councillor Elliott, right now the property is not owned by the city. The only properties that we own on this map are the lands west of 25 Walnut, 27 Walnut, and 31 Walnut. That's it. All the other land remains in our ownership. So the fact that people own property and they've put their gardens, that's the way it is, and unless the council wants to take the land, expropriate it, then there might be issues about leasing or having a pleasure agreement of some sort, but that I don't believe is on the table this evening. People own the land, they've done what they've done because they legally own the land.
Councillor?
So from basically the beach property, just north of 19, all the way down to the corner of Oak Ridge and Walnut, basically, we don't really need to obtain that land.
Through Mr. Mayor, to get to the 66 feet width,
We do.
you would. Right now, it's at about 50 feet that the city of Port Colborne owns and maintains Walnut Street. All their land to the west that you see on the O's, those are privately owned. The recommendation tonight recommends that council not do anything, kind of leave that be. Council wants to go further. You have property owners that are in opposition. Your option is to look into expropriation. That is really your only option.
Thank you.
So we're basically just going to take into account tonight, or in the future, just the properties that we want to sell our land to allow them to be unlandlocked. And I guess on Oak Ridge, we can just obtain the 3 or 4 properties to kind of make the road allowance wide enough.
Through Mr. Mayor, we need to separate the two roads. On Oak Ridge Crescent, the only roads that would be recommended to acquire would be west of 53 Walnut and 53 Oak Ridge being Armstrong property, and 57 the Butcher property. That portion of the road is on private property. All the other lands to the west, being owned by the Bears, Lockyer, Rubel, DeFrancesco, and Godin, the report does not recommend we acquire that because the property owners are in opposition. The other portion of the property that the city would need to acquire, because our road is on it, is north of the Vanderlands and south of the Matsons, and the land at the intersection of Lakeshore Road and Walnut Street. That portion of the road is on our property. That one's under ownership of the Crown. That's what this report recommends, and to work with those property owners on Walnut Street that want to resolve their landlocked issue. And as I mentioned in my report, there are a couple of those owners that are landlocked that they don't want any assistance. The report's recommending that we just try to work with the people that want assistance.
Okay, I have Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, you just relieved a lot of my fears, because when I read the report and I saw in your report that all the property owners on the west side of Oak Ridge were opposed, I thought, so why are we doing that if they're happy with the way things are? So thank you, Dan. And I think you relieved a few people who are out in the audience, who were in the gallery, or whatever you want to call it, because they were concerned about that as well. I'm total agreement. We need to resolve the issue of the individuals on Walnut. Councillor Steele and I sit on Committee of Adjustment, as is Councillor Elliott, and the three of us had to go through a lot when this came up to Committee of Adjustment. I think it has to be resolved, and I'm very happy that to see that we're going to resolve those landlocked issues with those and leave the rest alone. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Any further questions or comments? A couple questions I have, Dan, and I have to ask this because it may come up sooner than later if some of these properties are attempted to be sold. Obviously, this will impact properties being sold. If a lawyer actually picks up on a land or a property being landlocked, it can mess up the sale. True?
Through Mr. Mayor, absolutely. If the lawyer is a savvy one, he's going to do his title, his due diligence, and he's going to realize that the city does not have a maintained road in front of their property. It's owned under an estate. It's owned by the Crown. It's owned by some sort. So it could definitely impact or stop or slow down a potential land sale.
In terms of our responsibility legally, I know the report speaks about doing some, not doing others. Is there any, I guess, onus or any demand on us to have to do something legally?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe there is any onus to be a good city and a good neighbor and a good community. We would like to work with property owners, but if the city didn't want to do anything, it would be up to their lawyer to pursue and push the issue to city council.
Okay, so
we try to work with people to try to resolve their issues the best we can.
And my last question, and I have to ask this in terms of being responsible on behalf of the corporation, is there any legal or any exposure to liability that we can actually get ourselves into as time goes on?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that, in my opinion, the liability would remain on the property that is presently owned by us, and people are using that at their pleasure, that on the east side of Walnut Street.
So does it as well expose the residents to any exposure to liability?
It could, depending on what the situation and the circumstance is and what the liability is. There's only 3 properties there that are owned by the city. I will leave it at that. I'm not a lawyer,
Okay.
but there could be some concern, I believe, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, in asking about liability, throughout the city, and not only just in Port Colborne, across the entire province, property owners use municipal property all the time. Lots of times roads end up on private property. Liability rests where there's an action taken by one party or the other that negatively impacts or creates some kind of a situation that creates liability. In this instance, the fact is that what we own is what we use. We maintain the road on private property. If there's something that we do that causes damage on private property, it's still subject to a claim that would come into the municipality and be sent off. Is there a liability? It would be for the insurance and the lawyers to sort out if there was any, if there was a negligence or something that we did incorrectly. The fact is, in this situation, it is a land title problem. There are some properties using municipal property. There are some, the city's using some private property. The fact is, in either case, if there was a nuisance created or some kind of action taken by the city that injuriously affected, then there could be a claim filed, but only in those circumstances. If you do nothing at this point, the claim is going to be any different or no different than on a road that is normally 100 chains wide, 66 feet wide, or 80 feet wide, or 30 feet wide. The liability and the responsibility for ownership and the liability and responsibility of the joining owners remains the same.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Howe. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Dan. So if we can resolve actually the entire length of Walnut Street, I think that's our major concern. I think we should get that done first. Again, working with those landlocked property owners, plus I think we should work with all those other, as you go towards the lake on Walnut on the east side, all those areas where it says obtain, we should try to work as hard as we can with those property owners to get that road properly set. As far as Oak Ridge Crescent, it's a little bit different. But Dan, through to you, aside from Armstrong's and Butchard's property because of the poles that are there, on the other side you've got from basically the 3 properties, Rubel, DeFrancesco, and Godden. Are there any poles on those properties that may create a problem?
Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Steele, I was trying to quickly look at my the survey, the site condition plan, and on there you can see the locations of the poles and the guy wires. But Mr. Hanson raised another good point, is that there's probably gas lines that run into these properties as well. And who knows where that line is and what is affecting the different property owners and their extensions to their line. So it's not only the hydro that can be an issue, it could be what's underground as well.
Okay.
And the services into those properties. So, yeah, there are some services, or some, I should say, hydro on the Rubel, DeFrancesco, and Godden property that would be resolved. But I go back, those property owners are opposed. Yeah. And to your other comment about Walnut Street, all the property owners that are south of the beach, yeah, including the beach, they're not in favor or interested in the city acquiring a portion of their property.
Councillor?
Okay, but it doesn't stop us from continually working with the neighbors. Same with Oak Ridge Crescent. I mean, you know, I think they have to be aware of, and I think they've heard here tonight, that we're not here to widen a road or take trees out or gardens or whatever. It's going to be status quo. It's trying to get things done correctly that should have been done correctly years ago. I mean, I look at Doug Lockyer's property. Does he own the curb or do we own the curb? Did we put it on his property or is it still on ours? So when it needs to be repaired, is Mr. Lockyer going to be responsible for that? Or are we going to come in and fix something on somebody's private property? I mean, those are issues that are going to come back in the future, and we got to figure out who owns what. And I mean, if you do this the right way and get the road, or roads in this case, where they should be, I think it's going to alleviate a lot of these headaches down the future. I mean, portion of Oak Ridge is curbed, portion isn't. So where it's not curbed, it's not really an issue to these people because their grass goes right out to the edge of this pavement in some cases where there's a small stone shoulder. I mean, I look at my property on Olga Drive. In essence, the city property almost comes up half of my front lawn. Yet I've had gardens in there that we've taken out. I cut the lawn and everything else, but all the services are there, and they all go underground. I mean, it's going to be no different with these people. They're not going to see any change. It's just that as the future goes and things need to be repaired, whether it's a gas line, a hydro line, or curbing or whatever else, or the road itself, as you say, because some portions of the paved road are actually on somebody else's property. Do we send them a bill for the portion of asphalt that we're going to fix their road that's on our, that we use? I mean, that's the headache here that needs to be fixed, and I think the neighbors have to understand that. This isn't here to, again, take trees, grass, shrubs, flowers, or whatever else. It's really to make something right that's been wrong for decades, in essence. So, I mean, if they do have a question, I'd like to hear it. But I think we should try to work them as time goes on. Again, as Councilor Elliott says, the cell options on Walnut Street should be done as soon as possible. I think the dollar amount doesn't need to be debated here this evening. I think David and I can bring that up at the budget meeting on what we feel what the people should be responsible at that time. But as far as getting this all corrected as time goes on, I think it has to be done. I mean, it's fortunate the west side has been done, but piecemeal over those years. So,
if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Go ahead, Mr. Aquilino.
I did meet with each individual property owner, and I did go over each issue. We did look at that same sketch that shows all the services. And so each individual property owner is aware of those potential issues as you raised, and that was made clear with each individual property owner, and still there was, as you read in the report, no support. Going back to your comment for Mr. Lockyer, if you look at that same sketch, in fact, there is the catch basin is there and the curbing is there. It's not on his property based on the sketch that the surveyor's prepared.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aquilino, but we do want to find out what Councilor Steele's address is so we can take that half of his front yard back and maybe
back, you want it now.
Maybe
send you the bill for cutting the grass.
maybe putting a pumping station there would be appropriate.
It's not big enough.
Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. I'm wondering if there's a way we can resolve this that would help everyone. And I'm thinking of somehow getting a document or putting a certificate of some kind or whatever that states that if the property is ever sold, then that correction could be made. I don't know if that's possible. We'd have to probably talk to lawyers and everything else. But I'm wondering if there's a way for us to do that so that if and when nothing changes until they decide to sell, at that point, there could be something could happen that makes it become ours, and that adjustment is made at that time. And that may be something that the different people will look at. I don't know.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor Doucette, I'm not aware of any legality that would enable the city to do that at the time of transaction. Your only recourse is expropriation. Unless you get the consent of the new property owner that is willing for the city to acquire their land, that is really your only option.
And if I can just add, I think it's clear here through the recommendation that there's no appetite for us to assume any lands that otherwise the residents don't want. I think what we're looking at here is just simply taking care of the lands of the landlocked properties, quite frankly. If, in fact, there's any other situation, those will have to be dealt with at the time, I'm sure. These people will have to deal with it upon sale of their property. They may then be back here to ask for that to be taken care of then. And/or, secondly, and I think Councilor Steele hit it on the head with his initial comments, is the fact that once the residents find out that there's no, again, appetite for the city to go in there and put a 66-foot road, and they realize it's just more or less on paper versus on the road itself, I think people might get a bit more acceptable to what we're trying to do here in terms of cleaning this mess up. Dan, any comments?
No, Mr. Mayor. I think at the end of the day, we like to work and try to resolve as much as we can. Unfortunately, there's not an appetite for some property owners to want to have their issues resolved. There are utilities there. Some are not owned by the city. Some are Enbridge. Some are CMP. It's kind of out of our jurisdiction to try to work with them to satisfy all the utilities that are there. In a perfect world, yeah, we move forward and try to get everything accomplished, but as the report dictates, all the comments that you receive, there is not 100% support from all property owners to undertake this.
Great, thank you, Mr. Aquilina. With that, members of council, we do have a recommendation that's highlighted in the report. I would request that members of council do consider number 4 with respect to the 50% split versus 100% split. I think Mr. Elliott spoke on that, and I'll leave that to him and or Councillor Steele to deal with. But before we get to council's further vote on this issue, I know Mr. Lockyer is here. I know he wants to speak, and there may be other members of the public that want to speak as well, so I'm going to give you that opportunity now. Mr. Lockyer? Welcome. If you can just, your name and your address, Doug, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Doug Lockyer, 24 Oak Ridge Crescent. Here with regards to Oak Ridge Crescent, and I thank Councillor Steele for his comments based on what he has said about the street. We had a meeting with Mr. Aquilina and tried to explain that the plan of subdivision was submitted in December 1955. And that plan of subdivision indicates the properties that were given to the city, the 13 feet that were given to the city in 1955 under the plan of survey. And that's all we're saying, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We'd like to maintain that what was given to us or was provided in the subdivision plan of 1955. Mr. Aquilina, not taking any shots at you, Mr. Aquilina, okay, indicated a plan of 1873. In that plan, though, when I asked about another question, just to verify things, I asked them about the Indian right-of-way, which goes behind our properties. No comment on that one, but there's a 10-foot right-of-way behind our properties for Indian right-of-way. But we would like to maintain it as it is, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have no problems getting emergency vehicles up there. As you know, Mr. Mayor, if we had a problem with emergency vehicles going up there, this would have been back here when your dad was on council and even your grandfather was on council, as he lived across the street from us. And having been the fire chief, I would have had a problem getting vehicles into this area. We had no problems getting vehicles into this area. Mr. Hanson, with the snow plowing, has no problems with snow plowing up there. So there's not a real big problem. My other question is to Mr. Aquilina at the time, Mr. Mayor, he was asking for Mr. Burse in our property. I asked, why was he not looking at 3 properties on the other side of the street to straighten it out completely? And that's your grandparents' property, Mr. Mayor, starting with your grandparents' property right down to the corner. If there is a problem, why not take all of those 2, not just pick and choose? That's the end of my comments. I thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that it's going to stay as is based on what's here. And if it could be put a recommendation to stay with this plan, that would be fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the Indian right-of-way, I have no knowledge of that. I think I conveyed that to Mr. Lockyer. It's something that we never looked into. The survey sketch was just dealing with the road allowances. It wasn't dealing with private property owners to the west of these road allowances, so I'll leave that comment as is, and I trust Mr. Lockyer that he may have something on title that says that to that effect. I'm not aware of anything. For the lands to the east of his property that are not included, the survey sketch that was prepared, the site condition plan that was prepared in 2002, 2001. So at that time, the surveyors looked at what existing conditions were there, the fact that there are structures there, not only to the east of you, there's another structure to the north. And at that time, they assumed that it's not something that should be really looked into, and they prepared the plan based on that. And so that plan is today for council's consideration. I believe I answered the questions, Mr. Mayor.
Great.
If I have not, then please advise.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
Mr. Mayor, one more comment, if I may. All services are underground. The gas, water, sewer are in the center of the road right now. Okay? You're talking about the gas lines, Mr. Hanson. They are outside of the boulevard at the present time, right up the street. That's all done. The hydro pole is on city property. Our property marker is inside the hydro pole. That's our survey stake is inside the hydro pole on that particular site.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cloutier.
Mayor.
Just for clarification for members of council, my grandparents no longer live in that address and haven't lived there for quite some time, as they're both deceased. Members of council, or members of the public, are there any further comments or questions? Members of council, are there any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Steele.
Well, Your Worship, as far as what you mentioned about item 4 with regards to a split, is that not drawn out and sent to budget anyways? Should we be debating that tonight, or should we take it to the budget process?
Well, what I would suggest you do is, if in fact, again, council has an appetite to take on the 100% cost for the process, that you put it in there subject to budget. Because the 50%, even the 50% has to be subject to budget. So
that's true. Yeah. So then I would ask to amend 4 that we do the survey. Okay. I know there's nothing we can do about the law fees because that's beyond our control. But as far as survey, that we look after the surveying of this.
Okay. Do you have a seconder to that amendment, please? Councillor Elliott. Any further questions or comments to that? Dan, that cost would be about $11,000 in total. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing that up. Yeah, if the city is going to take on 100% of the cost, it's really looking at about $1,000 extra for the cost. Hopefully some of the fees, the legal fees and survey fees come under budget, and the $11,000 actually is going to be enough to cover everything. My ballpark is that it should, so the extra costs shouldn't be that astronomical for council to consider during the 2012 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. So to the amendment, members of council, we do have a mover and seconder. Are there any further questions or comments to that amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried to the amended motion. Moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Further, members of staff, members of the public? Everyone's smiling over there. Members of council, your pleasure to the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. And thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it. And Doug, yes, I will be by your place for some candy on Halloween night.
I will be prepared to do this. Don't forget, you didn't come last year.
I know.
I missed you.
When did you get out?
All the adult candy.
Wait for the CAO to come by.
Members of council will now move on to item 4.
See you, Chief.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me put this on. The Department of Planning and Development Report Number 2011-80, subject Information Update Report, Community Improvement Plan, Incentive Programs be approved, recommending that this report be received for information purposes.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Do we have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Kenny. Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report was provided for council's information, and it's a good news story. I wanted to be able to provide council with all the monies that have been allocated and all the improvements that have been taken on by the private property owners. The community improvement plans have been successful. There's no doubt about it. We have 20 applications that have been processed. The $50,000, that was the one-time funds in 2011, they are gone. The well is dry. We have actually applications that are being on hold subject to the 2012 budget considerations. For the Main Street Community Improvement Plan, we have 9 applications. For the downtown, we have 11. There are a couple more that have been submitted after this report that we are holding, pending the completion of the 2012 budget for council's consideration. Council is aware that we will have 5 community improvement plans in the very upcoming future. We have the Main Street CIP, we have the downtown CIP, we have the Brownfield CIP, we're going to have the East Waterfront CIP, we're going to have the Industrial CIP. So all these community improvement plans that council is going to be approving, they're working. When you look at all the different communities in the region of Niagara and what they're saying of how many applications they deem to be a successful year, they're saying 5 is a great year. 2010 to 2011, we had 20 applications, and then some. So this report is a great news story, and it shows that this community is very acceptable and very worthy of working towards improving their properties for the betterment of the entire community, both in the Main Street area and in the downtown area. So the plans are working, and that's what council needs to hear, and that's what the community needs to know. The word is out there, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Any questions or comments? Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. I mean, this is a home run, I guess, for the city overall. Fantastic work. I think with the partnership with the region, our share is 50 cent dollars. If we're going to throw out 50 cents, the region's giving us the other 50 and help out people. It does nothing but help out the city of Port Colborne. And when I read it and when I saw that we had 20 applications as opposed to the average of 5 to 7, I mean, it just shows you that people are interested in it and taking advantage of it. So when we go through the budget process for 2012, I think we really have to keep a keen eye to this, especially with the downtown CIP coming up. I really hope that people will take advantage of it over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott. Well stated. Councilor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess every town has its naysayers, and so when I read this report, I was really, really impressed that so many were taking advantage of this this program, because you know, you hear a lot of things out there and people saying, oh, what the heck are you doing, and why are you doing this for? Why, you know, who's really going to tap into all that? What a good news story this is. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Butters. Any further comments or questions? Just a quick comment, Dan. Thank you to you and your staff, as well as those folks down at the region. When the CIPs, the Community Improvement Plans, first came to be, I'd say probably close to 6-7 years ago, a lot of people didn't understand what they were there for, us nor the people in the public. I think we quickly found out that they did work as an economic stimulus to areas to not only improve, just as they are, to improve the area, but also to contribute to the economy of the area as it relates to dollars, but also giving attention. There's only so much we can do as a government in terms of trying to stimulate the economy, and this is one of them. Port Colborne's been very aggressive. We had the Main Street CIP, we have the downtown CIP, we have the waterfront CIP, we have the industrial CIP, and folks regionally, as part of the gateway, there's also a CIP that's being attached to this area with respect to industry. So not only do we have an opportunity to give out incentives, because you have to have a CIP to then therefore have the ability to give out incentives, but also obviously it improves those areas. In terms of what we've done, I think Main Street's a perfect example of that, but as well what the private sector is doing with the facade improvements and the different things that they're tapping into in terms of those incentives. So congrats to you, Dan, and your staff, the region and your staff, but equally as important, if not more important, is the business owners that have been able to take advantage of these programs. So job well done by everybody. We're now, as Dave said earlier, now looking forward to the other CIPs following through as Main Street did to really give that facelift to those areas of the city as well. So great job, guys. Well done.
And thank you to you, Mr. Mayor and Council as well, because without Council, there aren't any CIPs. Without any CIPs, there's no monies to help these private properties, so the Council needs to be thanked as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Well stated. Thank you, members of Council. And with that, I'll ask for the motion to be passed, hopefully. Members of Council, your pleasure. All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That Department of Chief Administrative Officer report number 2011-17, subject improving efficiency of electric consumption and repairs, be approved, recommending that Port Colborne Hydro Inc. be directed to investigate efficiencies and methods to improve service, reduce costs, reduce energy consumption, plus any other matter in respect of the street lighting system of the city of Port Colborne.
Thank you, Councilor Elliott. Do I have a second to that, please? Councilor Danch, questions or comments? Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm reading the report, and it says city operations have been responsible for securing parts and supplies, and CNPI subcontracts the maintenance, repair, and installation of the city streetlights. And I guess where it says options of financial considerations, do nothing, that this is not recommended. But if a city department is already looking after the maintenance of the lights because we own them, I guess my question is, why would a transfer to Port Colborne Hydro be able to find any efficiencies and savings and cost savings and energy savings and whatnot? And why isn't it able to be done through city staff now?
You want me to explain to him? Go ahead, Mr. Howe.
Your Worship, maintenance of streetlights in the city of Port Colborne is not conducted by our departments. It is CNPI, and they contract out to a company right now in Niagara Falls. With the licensability in Port Colborne Hydro, we may be able to do some unique things with streetlights that the city generally can't do because it has a service that buys the light, it puts the light up and pays for the power. In Ontario, the highest energy rate is streetlights. And our street lighting costs went from $180,000 to $280,000 in basically 1 year because of the rates. That's 1% on the tax rate of the city. Now, our Public Works and Operations Department are responsible to supply the stock. But we can't climb the poles, we can't change the lights, we can't fix them. Those are a specialty that has to be done through licensed electrical. Port Colborne Hydro may be able to do some of that and perhaps look at some kind of, if you think about, you know, maybe solar power on a set of poles that will pay for the power on 6 or 7 lights or something like that, and a changeover from high pressure sodium to perhaps the LED, the light emitting diodes. Right now, it's in the hands of CNP, and the initiative right now requires, I think, some of this municipality's close review at the political level, which is members of council sitting on Port Colborne Hydro, who will give it their oomph rather than leave it to a contract someplace. The recommendation here is to send it to Port Colborne Hydro, who will devote the time and effort to look at every opportunity we can possibly have and make the change necessary, which will reduce the cost and perhaps improve the lighting, including getting the lights that are off on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howe. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to imply that it was staff that looked after and changed the lights. And obviously, CNP with replacing the lights with their contract that they sub it out to needs to pick it up a little bit. I guess basically what you're saying is because Port Colborne Hydro has the license for that part of it, that's why they're able to sub it out and savings going forward. That's the part that I didn't understand, because the way that I read it, I couldn't figure out why Port Colborne Hydro was able to come up with savings and research and investigate different ways, and not staff itself.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Howe.
Your Worship, we can add staff in operations to focus on this. It's not that we can't do it, but Port Colborne Hydro can be focused rather than going to an engineering operations department saying, okay, now you're responsible to get into the nitty-gritty of electrical power and doing that. Right now they're doing a lot. They're working on the inventory. They're pulling together all the information about how much the cost of power is. That resource is going to stay, and we're going to continue to use that until such time as we can come up with a plan which is going to take what we've got and turn it around and make some money. And that'll be the focus of Port Colborne Hydro should this motion be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Are there any further questions or comments to this motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. We'll now move on to item 6. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That staff be directed to send correspondence to the Regional Municipality of Niagara and the Province of Ontario recommending the implementation of a regional or provincially wide regulation for the keeping of exotic animals and attaching Bill 125, Exotic Wildlife in Captivity Act 2010, a private member's bill which received first reading in November 2010.
Members of Council, do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Butters. Questions or comments? Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, you've been dealing with this. I've been dealing with it. Councillor Butters has been dealing with it because we do have exotic animals in the city of Port Colborne, and right now many of them happen to be in Ward 4. And we just had a scare from neighbors where possibly these animals were going to be moved to a new area, and the neighbors were quite upset. So certainly I will be contacting those neighbors and asking them to contact their MPP, along with what's coming from the city, encouraging the province to adopt an overall exotic animal bylaw. And I would encourage anyone else in the city of Port Colborne that has concerns to contact your MPP. There is a bill there, had first reading, just needs to get pushed along. So whatever we can do to make that happen would be a benefit to the city of Port Colborne.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments or questions? I think it was actually timely that in the Tribune today they had an editorial about it, about the exotic animals. And the irony in terms of having it on our agenda tonight was was good. But I think you're right, Councillor Bodner, and for those councillors that have been here since the late 90s and us trying to wrestle with that bylaw, it's been challenging and tasking, to say the very least. And I have to give a lot of credit to staff who've both legal staff and bylaw staff and even finance staff who've dealt with this. Councillor, you're correct. I think consistent legislation is needed throughout the province of Ontario. Other provinces do have legislation in place that's consistent. And right now, unfortunately, throughout the province, we have a mishmash of different bylaws that municipalities are trying to wrestle with. I think for the most part, with that, I'm assuming, Mr. Heil, that when we do send this letter off, we also send to the province some of the information that we've accrued over the past decade, because I think staff has done a great deal of work. And again, I'm a great believer that with that work being done, there's always an option. And we want to make sure that the province picks the proper option. And I think, upon this meeting, and Councillor Bodner, you can attest to this, and Councillor Butters, that the last thing you want to do is drive this underground. And I think the province has to be aware of the implications, of the consequences of what that legislation may state, based on the work that we've accrued over time and the regulations that we've put in place, so that therefore they don't just simply get lazy and say we're just going to ban it and drive it underground, versus look at other options that may in fact keep it at the surface, and therefore have we, municipalities in the province, have control and or based on regulation on these animals. Because the reality is, if you're not careful, you'll just simply drive the whole thing underground, and you're not going to have knowledge of these animals in our municipalities, because they're still going to be there. You just won't know. So I think this is not an easy issue, as we know, nor should the province think it's an easy issue. So again, may I reiterate that although we're going to send a simple letter off to the province and the region, I think it's equally as important that we send the information that we've accrued over time to go along with that letter. Mr. Howe?
Worship, what we'll do is we will, with consent of our legal counsel, based on some of the comments that they've been providing us, we can make some general comments about the difficulties, provide a bit of history, as well as some of our experience to, I guess, underline the issue and the difficulty that this whole matter brings at the local level. There's all kinds of experience that is known that we can also incorporate in our letter to the region and to the ministry in respect of the emphasis on a broad provincial control. We can do that, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Butters?
Thank you. Along with that, Mr. Mayor, how about sending it along to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario as well? They're really the body that lobbies the government for change and to draw attention to difficulties. So what about sending it to AMO as well, sir?
Thank you, Councillor, and we can do that, but I think it's beyond that now. I think the government, based on it having already first reading, has already recognized the need for a consistent legislation. I think where your idea would come in perfectly is to push it, is to get AMO to say, listen, guys, don't stop dragging your feet on this. Let's push this thing forward. And as well, again, I'll reiterate it again and emphasize it, how important it is to send the work that we've done in the past decade along with it. Because again, it's not an easy issue. And the last thing we want to do is have the province come out and defeat the purpose by driving this underground. And next thing you know, you got our firemen going into a home, not with no knowledge of something being in there, and coming face to face with something that we could have known about that we don't know about. Police, EMS, and even neighbors for that matter. So I think it's not an easy issue to tackle, and I think they have to recognize that. They can't just simply have a knee-jerk reaction and just outright make the wrong call, make the wrong decision. Go ahead.
I think that I'm sure many of you saw what happened in the United States last week where a fellow let loose his animals before he took his own life, and it was a terrible situation. And people can say, well, you know what, that just happens there. Well, I'm sure the people who lived around there probably said the same thing. This happens somewhere else. So, we need to do all we can to push this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything further on this item? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members of council. We'll now move on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? With none, I'll accept the motion to adjourn this portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Butters, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Members will now move on to our council portion of tonight's agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no addendum items.
Thank you, Ashley. Members of council, I'll need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Steele, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Any disclosures this evening? With none, I do have 3 sets of minutes here. I'll do them in block if you don't mind, and I'll be looking for a mover and seconder. The minutes of the 36th meeting special of council dated October 4th, 2011. The minutes of the 37th meeting special of council dated October 11th, 2011. And the minutes of the 38th meeting regular of council dated October 11th, 2011. Members of council, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Kenny, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Items requiring separate discussion? With none, I'll ask for a motion to accept the items. Councillor Steele, Councillor Kenny, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. I do have 4 sets of minutes of boards, commissions, and committees, and I'll do them in block if you don't mind. That's fine. The minutes of the Port Colborne Gateway BIA AGM Annual General Meeting dated October 3rd, 2011. The minutes of the Port Colborne Gateway BIA Board Meeting dated October 3rd, 2011. The minutes of the Downtown BIA General Meeting of August 31st, 2011. And the minutes of the Downtown BIA General Meeting of September 14th, 2011. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any notices of motion? With none, Madam Clerk, the introduction of the bylaws, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed. Bylaw 570613711, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 89, 2000, being a bylaw respecting traffic and parking on city roads, Steele Street. Bylaw 570713811, being a bylaw to close temporarily to vehicular traffic sections of various streets for purposes of the 2011 Santa Claus Parade. Bylaw 570813911, being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 85 to the official plan for the city of Port Colborne. Bylaw 570914011, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 11509781, respecting part of lots 5 and 6 northwest corner of Erie and George Streets, Plan 763, and being parts 1 and 2 on Plan 59R 14504 in the city of Port Colborne, known as the Humberston Shoe Park. And finally, bylaw 571014111, being a bylaw to appoint a member to the Port Colborne Gateway Business Improvement Area Board of Management.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, I need a motion to move the bylaws. Councillor Butters, Councillor Kenny, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Madam Clerk, the confirmatory bylaw, please.
That the following bylaw be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed. Bylaw 571114211, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of Council, October 24, 2011.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Kenny, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Before I ask for a motion to go into closed session, 3 dates, guys. 3 meetings left in 2011. We have the next meeting for November 14th, Committee of the Whole, Council, here in the Chamber, beginning at 6:30 p.m. Followed by Monday, November 28th, 2011, Committee of the Whole, Council, once again here in the Chamber, beginning at 6:30 p.m. And our last meeting for 2011, as established tonight by motion of Council, December 12th, 2011, Committee of the Whole Council, once again here in the chamber, beginning at 6:30 p.m. With that, members of council, I will ask for a motion to go into closed session to proceed with matters, which is the minutes of the closed session portion of the October 4th, 2011 special council meeting, the minutes of the closed session portion of the October 11th, 2011 special council meeting, the minutes of the closed session portion of the October 11th, 2011 regular council meeting, and finally, the confidential memorandum from Cecil Vincent, Manager of Special Projects and Corporate Strategy, concerning the Sugarloaf Marina lease pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, Section 239, 2A, the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Steele, Councillor Bodner, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Have a great week.